En este momento concederé la palabra a la ponente principal, la señora Razan Al Mubarak, personalidad de alto nivel de las Naciones Unidas sobre el cambio climático. Okay.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's a great honor to be with you here today, and I'd like to thank the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues for giving me the opportunity to engage with you on the importance of Indigenous peoples, human health, planetary and territorial health, and climate change. Distinguished guests, having had the privilege to work in the field of nature conservation, like many of us here today, I recognize that those issues are intrinsically linked. And like all of us here today, recognize that Indigenous peoples are critical in protecting the world's most biodiverse, the most ecologically and culturally important areas, from the Amazon to the Congo, from the Arctic to the Pacific. Indigenous peoples dwell on our planet's most breathtaking landscapes and wild spaces. But ladies and gentlemen, we also recognize the environmental and socioeconomic injustices. Indigenous peoples and the land on which they live are also bearing the brunt of climate change. And it's not only the land, it's not only the sea that is bearing witness, but climate change is also devastating livelihoods and threatening the loss of identity, threatening the loss of beliefs and cultures. However, despite this vulnerability, and perhaps because of this responsibility, Indigenous peoples are leading climate change action all over the world. Whether it's on adaptation, whether it's on building resilience, or mitigating climate change. And whilst Indigenous peoples only account for 5% of the world's population, you manage at least 25% of the world's land surface, 40% of the world's protected areas, and steward 80% of the world's biodiversity. And it's because of your effort and the relentless work of Indigenous peoples' organizations globally that these truths, ladies and gentlemen, are now being recognized. They're being recognized at the UN and a number of international multilateral frameworks, such as the IPCC, the Glasgow Climate Pact, the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework, and many, many others. But despite this recognition, there is still much work to be done to ensure that future generations, our children, our grandchildren, the children of our grandchildren, continue to benefit from the planetary and territorial health and live in harmony with nature and continue to pass knowledge from one generation to the other, all of which can only be achieved through a right-based approach. When taking action to address climate change, we must be guided by the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and ensure that the rights of Indigenous peoples are not only considered, but promoted and respected, and are at the heart and the core of the solutions that we design. Or in other words, Indigenous peoples must not only be a full partner in the decision-making process, they must lead the process of putting together the necessary policies and be listened to. As the UN High-Level Champion for Climate Change and as president of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, I am committed to working with the COP28 presidency to ensure that nature is at the heart of the climate change agenda. And I truly believe that we will not be able to deliver on the Paris Agreement without nature, and we cannot deliver on the climate change either without the genuine and authentic partnership of indigenous peoples across adaptation, across financing, and decarbonization. Because nature conservation and addressing climate change require long-term foresight and guardianship. And let's be honest and be frank, sometimes it goes beyond governments and institutions. Indigenous peoples' customs arising from the collective knowledge over millennia, if allowed to continue, is the sustainable guardianship and legacy that our planet needs. Dear colleagues, your knowledge, your practices are invaluable in achieving sustainable development and protecting biodiversity. And as such, you must be fully engaged in the development of the policies and the program that affect our lives and the environment. Again, I'd like to say and commit to you that I am here as the UN High-Level Climate Change Champion and IUCN President to ensure that I work with you, that I engage, that I listen, to ensure that your voice is front and center at the upcoming COP28 and beyond, to build a more just, a more equitable, and sustainable world for us all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Razan. We are really glad to have you here as keynote speakers and as COP28 presidency representative. We hear you. So we will have Indigenous people representative at the COP28 who will be in your side, and we wanted you to be in our side in order to fight for our rights, then especially our knowledge, as you said, as the solutions. So we're really looking forward to more collaboration with you, with your presidency from now on and later. Thank you for coming.